Kia ora koutou. Welcome to Plunket Facebook Live on Keeping Warm in Winter. I'm Marie-Louise. I'm one of the clinical leaders with Plunket Line. We'll be hosting you today, and alongside me I have Gracie. Gracie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Kia ora everyone, I'm Gracie. I'm a registered nurse working on Plunket Line. Previously I was working in the community as a Plunket nurse, but I'm really excited to be here today to have a chat about keeping warm.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gracie. So today we're going to talk about keeping warm as safely as possible this winter. And so this is going to run through a couple of tips. So some general tips about keeping warm and what to be aiming for, using heaters safely. We'll touch briefly on safe sleep over winter, travelling safely, and water temperature for things like baths. So to get us started, Gracie, are you able to talk about some of the general advice or guidelines that whānau can use to ensure pepe is kept warm enough?
Yeah, of course. So we completely understand that keeping our babies and tamariki warm during winter, and especially through the cold day and nights, can be really tricky. But some ways to check their temperature, you can pop your hand on their back, on their skin, between their shoulder blades, and use your hand to check the temperature. Using layers to keep baby warm, because you can peel them off and take them off and put them on during the day. And so, and just keeping a close eye on their temperature through the day is a great way to regulate and see what their temperature is. And another, rule of thumb, what's your rule of thumb there, Marie-Louise?
Well, I was going to say one of those rules of thumb is if you think about the little ones that aren't as active, so, our young babies that are not moving as much, one layer more than perhaps what you're wearing can be really helpful. But also when you've got those layers on, get that hand down your back if you're sort of thinking, oh, I'm feeling a little bit hot, I wonder what they're feeling like, and putting that hand down there. If they're feeling quite warm but clammy, then maybe they need a layer off, and then rechecking again, as they're perhaps being more active or what they're doing there. Skin to skin, though, Gracie, that's another really good one for our wee babies, isn't it?
It is definitely. And skin to skin isn't only great to keep them warm, but it's also good for that nice bonding connection. Yeah. And another thing when we're talking about, keeping them warm is about the type of material, isn't it,
Yes.
Marie-Louise? Yeah.
That is such a big one because one of the things we know is, unfortunately, the cheapest fibres that we have for babies are often polyester, and that does tend to not keep them warm in the same way. It's not breathable. So your best fibres that you can use are really things like your cottons, your wool, so merinos, so anything that's a natural fibre and a reasonably loose weave, and just sort of thinking about how you do it. Obviously, some wool things are really expensive, so good layers of cotton material. So and checking that is probably a good idea. Just thinking about what outside of how we dress, heaters are something that we need to be a little bit aware of that keeps us toasty. You've got some thoughts on heaters, Gracie?
Yeah, definitely. So the rule of thumb with heaters, I guess, a metre from the heater. So this is all around about keeping our pepe and tamariki a good distance from heaters to prevent burns, but also, also not from drying them out or keeping them, we don't want to keep them under a heater or under a heat pump, even at night. It's really important. Yeah. Or under fans.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess another little thing as well is, even though we want to keep the house toasty and warm, it is actually important to open the windows and open the curtains up to allow the house to ventilate. So even if that's for 15 or 30 minutes every morning, just to let the air flow, fresh air come in, old air go out, and it helps keep the house feeling fresher as well. Yeah.
And it can be a good idea. So when it starts to cool down at about 4 in the afternoon, as that heat's going out of the sun, that's when you close your windows, and even to a certain extent close your your curtains too, to sort of keep some of that warmth in. So hopefully you're not then having to have your heaters up really high. And just a wee note, going back, circling back on those heaters and fires, make sure you don't cover them. I know you want to get your clothes toasty warm for when they're coming out of the bath, or dry, or you're having to dry clothes, but keep that a metre away as well, because again, we don't want to have fires. And I'm really mindful, we did a live chat last year with our friends at Fire and Emergency about keeping warm, so we're going to put a link into the comments on the chat for you, so that you can sort of have a wee look at that. On a safety note too, and this is something when we were a lot younger, if you do have heaters that are close by and you get your little people out of the bath, and they want to run and get dressed in front of the heater, just be really, really aware you need to keep them a good distance away, because warm, wet skin, if it accidentally touches something hot, it can burn. So it's really, really important that you're being very careful with our tamariki anywhere near those heaters to prevent burns.
Yes.
We've had a bit of a focus on safe sleep recently, and keeping warm and with safe sleep. We recognised Safe Sleep Day earlier this month, so there's quite a lot of overlap in this one here. But Gracie, can you give us some key pieces of advice on sleeping our pepe safely and warmly?
Yeah, definitely. So, we talk a lot about safe sleep and the importance. And, the new foundations for safe sleep is sleeping baby flat on their back, face clear, a firm, flat mattress with their face up. And it's also really important to include the extended whānau in the practice of keeping our baby safe with sleep. And, this can whānau members can be involved in this by keeping a smoke-free environment for baby and tamariki, as well as a vape-free environment. And that's all about, if there is going to be smoking and vaping, that happens outside and away from the child. And also, when you come back inside, you change your clothes and you give your hands a good wash. And this is all really awesome prevention strategies that the whole whānau can implement.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we had a whole live chat on this topic from earlier on this month. So you can watch that either on our Facebook page or the Plunket YouTube channel, and we'll pop a wee link into the comments about that too. So how do you keep baby warm, Gracie? What are your suggestions for keeping baby warm at night?
Yeah, so, as we spoke a little bit about earlier, layers are an awesome thing, very important. And we recommend that you dress your baby for the coolest part of the night, which is actually usually between the hours of 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. So, dressing them in breathable fibres, and also ensuring the bedding is breathable too. So we don't want those polyester pretty looking blankets on the bed. We want to make sure that the blankets and their sleep sacks and their clothing is also breathable with that that breathable natural fibres, not synthetic fibres. And the ideal temperature for a room is between 18 and 21 degrees. We are very aware that this sometimes is very hard to regulate a room temperature, but this is why layers are so important. Do you have any other advice on that, Marie-Louise?
I think I guess the main thing I would say about keeping the room warm is, rather than worrying a huge amount of exactly what that temperature is, it's probably better to err slightly on the cooler side rather than too warm, because again, yourself, if you're too hot, it's much harder to sleep than if it's a little bit cooler. And just getting into the habit, you've popped your baby down to sleep perhaps before you go to bed, checking down their back and for temperature before you go to bed. That gives you sort of a really good guide, a good rule of thumb. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Marie-Louise. And moving on from sleep, are you able to give us a little bit of advice about travelling in these colder months? Obviously, people are travelling, and
yeah, just going out in the car. You head out the door and you've sort of rugged up because you're going outside, but then you hop into the car and you've got all of these layers on. So just thinking about car seats and those big puffy jackets, they don't really mix. So your best bet is if you can take those big heavy jackets off before you put Peppy into the car seat, because what happens with that is you wind up loosening the car seat and it no longer becomes as safe. It's not going to hold them safely in the car seat. So if you can take them off before you strap Peppy in would be great. And if it is a bit cool, maybe if you've got sort of either use that puffy jacket or use something like that you tuck around them on the outside over the top of those straps. But also bearing in mind that often when you're in the car, you've got the heater on, and so that's warming things up quite a bit. So it's also that same thing about being aware that your little one isn't overheating in that car seat in the same way that we would be checking them when they're at home. So you may find that they don't need to have their warm hats or anything like that on when they're in the car seat either. And yes, and so think about what you're wearing in the car seat. In the car, if you're thinking, gosh, I'm quite warm in here, then you know that your baby is quite warm. So, and again, that moving from temperature in the car to out again, if you take a minute to get that, to get their jackets back on as you're getting out of the car, it does take a little bit more time, but it does actually probably keep them a little bit healthier, because they're not constantly going from ultra hot to cold and back again.
So, yeah.
Okay. So just looking to see where we've got to. So to finish us out for today, are you able to talk a bit about baths and showers, Gracie, with Peppy and Tamariki? So making sure that it's not too hot really is the key there.
Yeah, definitely. So, it is really, really important that we are mindful of the temperature of the water when showering and bathing our Peppy and Tamariki, because Peppy and young children have thinner and more sensitive skin than what us adults do. So it's easier, their skin can burn easier, and burns are very dangerous if they're not, if that happens. So we need to be very mindful of what we can do to prevent burns from occurring. Sometimes we don't all have a thermometer to check the water temperature. So what you can do is ensuring that you put your whole hand in the bath. So getting your wrist, because often our hands are usually quite durable to temperature, but it's our wrists and our elbows that are a good measure to see if it's a good temperature. And I guess we'd say it's better to go a bit cooler than too warm. Is that right, Mary-Louise,
yes.
with that? Yeah.
Again, because you don't want to risk scalding your little one. So, you're much better to go a little bit cooler if you need to, rather than too warm. Absolutely, Gracie. Yeah. Cool. We've had a question in the chat from Courtney, who wants to know about how many blankets for a 2-year-old on the bed. My thinking, and Gracie, please step in if you've got any ideas on this. My thinking would be it would depend on what you're sleeping them in. So, for instance, do they have like a cotton singlet on and then they've got long sleeve pajamas and things like that? You may find that perhaps a cotton sheet and one blanket is enough. But again, thinking about your house, you might start with 2 wool blankets and move one off. But I think the variation depends a little bit on how much you're dressing them in, whether they're a little one that likes to kick their blankets off, because that can often be a bit of an issue when they're 2. Gracie, have you got thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, I think that sounds perfect. Sometimes it's good if we're dressing them in something warm, then it's sort of the blanket. Yeah, definitely. And I think ideally as well for a 2-year-old, we'd be recommending that breathable type fiber blankets Absolutely. As well. Yeah, and I guess we'll be wrapping up soon, Mary-Louise, but I thought as well I should just mention about the ideal temperature for a bath, if you did have a thermometer.
Would be around,
yes. Would be around 37 to 38 degrees. Okay. And we're going to put a couple of links actually on the chat just regarding temperatures and baths and water and all that jazz. So we'll pop that in. Do you have any other Any other things to add, Mary-Louise?
No, I feel the main thing, actually, just to reiterate, is, it's that checking, that constant checking during the day, sort of thinking about actually how am I feeling, and then checking that against my little one by putting a hand down the back. And I'll put my hand up and say that with my little people a few years ago, yeah, I overheated them, sent them to the doctor with a temperature, and he looked at me and said, yeah, you just need to take some layers off. Yeah. So, just keep checking, think about it yourself, and keep checking on your bubbers.
Yeah, 100%. And you can always call Plunket Line anytime.
Absolutely.
We're available 24/7 for any advice or any other tips you might need around this topic, or unwell babies or anything like that. And I thank you for presenting with me today, Mary-Louise. It's been lovely.
Thank you, Gracie. And it's been wonderful to sort of spend this time with you and to listen to your expertise too. So thank you, everyone. Have a really great rest of your day. Ngā mihi.